Morning. Erev my son's bar mitzvah, so I hope you're celebrating with me. God bless him. There once was a wizard who argued with a Talmudic sage called Ameimar and criticized him. Persian wizard. I guess they had a pointy cap. He says to Ameimar, the sage, he says, from your midpoint and up is the domain of Hurmiz, the god of good, who created the significant and important parts of the body, the respiratory system and up fuels the heart and the mind. Separating it from the midpoint and down is the domain of a Hurmiz. So it's one word, one name, or an aleph in front of it. Is it Hurmiz or a Hurmiz, the god of the opposite? He's saying that there's two domains. One belongs to the pure zone, and one is a totally different domain, completely separate, and has its own administration. So Ameimar, representing monotheism in Judaism, the novel gift to the world of monotheism, is a different way to look at the world entirely. Ameimar said to him, if so, how does a Hurmiz allow Hurmiz to urinate in his territory? You know, you fence off your zone with the fire hydrants. There is clearly higher faculties in a person and lower faculties of a person. So why, if there's two zones, will the lower zone let itself be in a lower place and be virtually disgraced like that? Why are there lower faculties of the body that are the function of which is to discern and sift amongst a lot of waste some finer content and lift that up to the top, to the higher faculties of heart and mind? So we have a digestive system that essentially fuels all activity. Energy can be used on writing a concerto, writing some idea that very few people on the planet would be interested to hear, or whatever it is. It's also important. And all of that comes from the same fuel. So the idea basically is that the higher elements of food fuel the functions that are also higher. But there is a lower format to the food, and that's seen clearly in the body system, flushing it all out. To be healthy, you have to flush it out. But that flushing out is a disgrace to where everything goes into the sewer. If there's two domains, why would one allow itself to be disgraced? Ameimar argues, and we have a beautiful mimer of the Mitteler Rebbe to explain this. I want to read you some of the Gemaras in it. I just read you one. That's from Sanhedrin Lamed Tes Samad Aleph. So he explains this in a lengthy discussion, maybe I'll just paraphrase a lot of it, about how there are these two systems in the body, the respiratory and the digestive system, and they're distinguished by a diaphragm. Have you ever seen the movie Meatballs? When I was a kid, I saw that movie. It illustrates what the function of a diaphragm is. It controls this divide. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about, but I went to the camp where this movie was filmed in with Bill Murray. I went to that camp as a kid, and they filmed scenes that were exactly. I actually think they filmed the actual Visitors' Day, didn't they? For Meatballs. So these two systems, separated by the diaphragm, you have two systems. One is a bit icky, and one is refined and elegant. And he brings a different version of this Gemara. The version of Tesface, which reads it not a Hurmiz or a Hurmiz with an aleph in front or not. These two different names for one representing the higher faculties and one the lower. One's a demon and a Havdil, one is Hashem himself. Two forces that drive us. He switches around the gears according to Tesface in this Maimar, and that's not a Hurmiz, but a Hurmin with a nun, with the letter, long nun at the end of a word, which goes down below the belt, which is the domain of Lilith, who is mentioned in this context. Because the lower domain is likened to this son of Lilith called a Hurmin, who goes below the belt, this demon that jumps on either side of the city walls, juggling 2 glasses of wine, both filled and nothing spilling, showing his ability to infiltrate and have 2 cups of wine, celebrating 2 types of pleasures, the Gra teaches. The self-gratification that is in the physical pleasures and the self-gratification that is in spiritual pursuits. And if it's not done to experience the authorships of the dynamic, the relationship with Hashem, as opposed to the interface that you connect with, that is something that's both in the realm of this demon called Hurmin with a nun, a long nun. Okay, so maybe that will summarize some of the other Gemaras that I was going to use to explain this, and you could look it up in the, Google has everything you could ask for on this topic. My eyes were opened up last night when I started reading these midrashim about Lilith and her demon children, and wow. You just get a lot of information very fast in English, all collected for you. There's so much good that can be done with this horror show of an internet. All of our children, and I mean the child in us too, all at, thank you, being sullied by the greatest power given to, the greatest tool that is given to mankind, that you could have the entire library in your language on your screen, on your sofa. That is absolutely unprecedented, and now that gift is the biggest challenge for us. If we saw ourselves in 2 domains, that there's a place you could hide and just say, this is a different domain, why is it the lowest things that attract us to that? And is that a demonic force, Chas v'shalom? Or is it, as Ameimar argues to the wizard and says, it's all part of a singular hub, bub. Okay, so check out the part of him juggling the wine. I want to learn this Maimar. It's pretty short. I think we could do it. We woke up very early, and I'm happy that you're stealing moments away from your important morning to do this. It speaks about how Hashem calls us his twin, Tamasi. It's my daughter, my sister, my mother. All 3 levels we have a dynamic with Hashem, but he's also called our twin. And then you have these two twin worlds, the world of the heart and mind, the higher faculties, and you have the lower thing. And is that thing some reject, or is it my twin? Chava, the first woman, was created from heart of Adam. There's two ways that could be done. The first Chava, I learned, my eyes were opened last night. The first Chava, the first woman, Adam saw how she was being created, in that even though she was the most beautiful woman that had complete command over Adam, the absolute, he couldn't find any mate, and he found this woman, the first one. He saw her being created, and it wasn't good enough for him. So she went bye-bye, and a new Chava took her place, one that was again created from Adam, but he was put to sleep. And he wakes up to this glorious bride. So we are twins in the sense, not that we're lesser, but we were like these Siamese twins. Oh, these two polarities. Here we're talking about how Hashem calls us. So it's between Hashem and us, as opposed to that polarity that exists within us. We have the male force and this disgust by seeing how lowly something could look like it's coming from, and how beautiful it can appear on the outside when it's appreciated in its whole. With a W. This, now we'll understand what it means, my twin, the Mitteler Rebbe says. Tehine ksiv uma'ayin yetzim aves Hashem v'hishkas nachal hashitim. It says that a wellspring comes out from the house of Hashem and waters the river of Shittim. Shittim is a beautiful word in Hebrew. It means shtut. Shtut to Kedusha is when you take that muck, that Shittim, and it becomes Yitzchak's fortune, which was his fertilizer on his fields, was worth more than all the gold of the king. He had a real operation going. When he saw that the world was supposed to be a place not of filth, but something that could be used to be very productive, and the earth becomes the source with a vapor that ascends as before it was just hovering, it ends up serving. So there's going to be a wellspring that's going to illuminate that entire world of Shittim. So the Mitteler says, we'll explain all this in the light of what it says in the Gemara that we just learned. So you should have some background. But he has this girsa of the Taisvais, which makes it very subject of further interpretation when he talks about the nun that goes down. Amar le'ahu amgusha. Have you heard the word magus in English for like magician, magus? The Aramaic is amgusa. It's got the same letters. Ameimar. So this amgusa, this wizard, says to Ameimar, mipalgachu la'ela de Hurmiz. From your upper part of your body and up, it's from the realm of Hurmiz. It's his name, it's the Hurmiz, or umipalgachu sata. In the lower realm, on you, the lower part of your body, de Hurmiz. That's not a Hurmiz, it's Hurmiz without the aleph. There's not the alufa shel olam, the aleph at the front of it. It's a different domain. It's the zone of the demon. Kad girsa Rashi, and that's the way Rashi understands it. But the girsa Taisvais had a different version of it. Mipalgach u'le'ela de Hurmiz, with a different name. So the first one is Hurmiz without the aleph. It's not about whether the aleph is first. It's about whether the zayin is used for a nun instead. It becomes this thing that just takes us down. The Hurmiz, the Hurmin, the lower part of you is associated with the zone of Hurmin ben Nun, Vizeh Ikar. And the Mitteler Rebbe says that's the main girsa. This is what we're going to darshan. Uperusha, and this is the meaning. The Hurmiz lashon chen, the first name that associated with upper parts of us means grace, beauty. Kama ifra Hurmiz, the beauty of this Hurmiz, of this grace. Hurmin the nun, whereas if you have the zone of the Hurmin with the nun, Kama Hurmin bar Lilith, Lilsa, Hurmin the son of Lilith, the female enticing demon. Hey Andrew, good to see you. Andrew Stephen. So this spot, this side, this child of Lilith is an entirely different zone. And you cannot bring any light from above into that zone. It's got its own territory, the magician tells Ameimar. The Hey Shiva of Ameimar, so Ameimar answers him. You're telling me that, in other words, this magician was telling the sage, you're a holy guy, but only when you're in the zone of light of the mind and heart. But you have a part of you that's low, and that comes from the demon zone, and it's a different domain entirely. So what makes you so great? I think that's the conversation there. So Ameimar answers them, if so, how does the second domain, the lower domain, the zone of Hurmin, allow Hurmiz to pass its sullied waters downward towards my zone? That's offensive. The Yuvanzeh. So what was his answer, and how did he dispel the notion of two zones from this Persian magician with this reference to the need to have integrity of the body, that every part of the body is important, and every part is illuminated with the same purpose. One's higher faculties, it sits up higher. It's interesting that the commentaries explain that it's more, they're talking about liquid consumption rather than food. And one explanation I learned was that food is an energy that affects your entire body up and down alike. So it doesn't illustrate so much the separateness of the two zones, because higher and lower alike depend on the same food, as it explains here in this Ameimar. Whereas drinking is used to quench parched lips, to be able to speak and do more elevated functions. Remember, the speaking, the kingdom, that separates us more than our thumb even. And is more flushed out from our system after the upper part of our body is nourished with it. It's not as important, this interpretation says, as the lower functions, and therefore it represents the separation more so than consuming lots of food, or any amount of food rather. ויובן זה על פי הקדמה בתחילה בעניין הידוע על פי מה שכתוב וכל קרובי השם קודשי. It says in Psalms, all of my, basically gizzard, I suppose, or you like the intestine, like the inner parts of you, every part of you, praises God's sanctified name. Diesh malachim, so there are angels, the Mitteler Rebbe says here, shenikroim krovayim, that's stomach. They're called the inner parts, the inner organs, and stomach. They're those angels, that's their function. The dibra Torah b'lashon b'nei adam, because our Torah speaks to us in our language. So we understand the importance of a stomach and its function in our body, and that's the way Hashem communicates to us spiritual information through physical things. And even though there is no body to Hashem, Harei ne'amar einei Hashem aznei chulu, talks about the eyes of God and the ears of God. So God doesn't have a body, but he has all these allegorical bodily features, so to speak. Shen malachim al yonim, that these are the supernal angels. So God creates a divine system run by angels that are analogous to the parts of the body. And look at those beautiful pictures they have of like the eyeball to like some galaxy out there that looks like an eyeball, and how there's like the rings of a tree is like, I don't know, something else. They once had like the Beatles' popularity going to the sunspots of Mars or something like that, connecting every single thing in a chart that had the exact same pattern. So God doesn't have a body, but he creates an angelic heavenly system that has features that are analogous to parts of our body. God created a world so we can understand him. And he decided to create a certain structure to the body to teach us something. So we are a little version of Ilam Katan, a small world. God is the creator of a world that's supposed to be reflected in you. So equally we have the ability to connect to Hashem in anything that we're into at any height. But in the world of angels, that's called the digestive system, and that has a flushing out and a separation, a rectification required before the finer frequencies are accessed. So you have food energy giving vitality to higher faculties. Like playing tic-tac-toe isn't as sophisticated as meditating on Hashem. So there is a hierarchy reflected in this system that Hashem made. Some things are meant to be flushed out, and some things are meant to be uplifted and brought to higher purpose. So those are called angels. So when we say Hashem has eyes and ears, that's the supernal angelic world. Shenikra einayim udanim, the Shechina. So the Shechina, the divine presence, is manifest in a way that's analogous to a body. So there's part of this divine presence sort of clothing that give it a body and a digestive system. So this is explained as follows. That at first glance you could say that since Hashem created the world reflective, good and evil, every single thing has its counterpart. How could it be that there is a divine energy that goes so superficial, like the part of the physical world that completely removes itself from any godly purpose? That is a very sullied thing for such a divine energy. So we're going to have a way to explain this from our own personage, our flesh, because we have two main systems that govern our life function, which is breathing and eating. Consuming here liquid actually more. And so the upper part is associated with the lungs and the heart, etc. The ivri hamazain, the keres, ubnei ma'ayin. And the digestive system is in the stomach and the intestines. The chatzar kaved and the diaphragm, hu shemachzik bein ivrei neshima ivrei hamazain, that separates the breathing system and the digestive system. Devadai nivdal erech paulas ruchnius dereya b'lav. That certainly you could see the difference in the spiritual function of the heart and of the lungs and the heart. The paula gashmis v'tikravayim, from a physical thing like the stomach. And there's this diaphragm that separates these two zones. That it's known, that it's explained in light of the idea that it's known that food contains both physical and spiritual energy. And it first has to be digested, which means to process it all, in order to separate the different energies to the places that they're meant to go. The spiritual energy becomes part of the blood, and it goes into the left ventricle of the heart. And that allows all the limbs of the body to get spiritual energy. So movement is usually associated with spiritual energy. It's more concealed in like a rock than a plant, for example. And a chicken and then an eagle, you could see that it goes higher and higher. Kefi mezeg betunas philosophy, according to the need of what the energy is used for. Sharei anu rayim, because we see shalach shiur ikul shu vamshais, that after the digestive process is taking place, which takes 6 hours, mischazek ha'adam b'chol keikas evarav, all the faculties of the person, from head to tail, every part of the person gets vitality, ke'echad, equally, or maybe in one shot. Dehainu sheseichel shebemeach yischazek lahaskil lahavin, that the mind and the brain will be strengthened to be able to understand things better, process things better. Ve'ayin mischazek b'riyah, and you could see much better than Clark Kent with the glasses. Ve'yad b'pu'la, and the hand from its, curling, I suppose, is important to have a good hand when you're a curler. The ken haragel, the hilloch, and the leg for walking, the kaigav and light, the shar kaikis pnimis v'chitzenis, and every function, whether it's an inward function, like philosophy, or a most external, like polishing your heels. Ubehifech, the tinus, and the opposite, when one fasts, one makes you wonder why we should do it. It makes all of our limbs weak. From the head to the foot, because his brain is weak, and he can't use it so well. And the eye weakens, in its vision. And the hand can't do its job. Or the foot to walk, etc. Therefore, it shows that food contains energy for everything required in all levels. And affects everybody in his own personage. So if one guy is like a very good pole vaulter, he would use that energy different than like a chess champion. So that whole system happens in the stomach, which cooks and digests Hamichael, the food, the nivra kolach lakim shebay va'ela hakolalev, and it separates out all of the higher energies required for the heart. And it all goes up to the heart. And misham yushlach lachol aver, and the blood, miraculously contains the ability to take it. Each part of the body gets what it requires through the blood. I can't believe we have time for all this. I hope you do too. At least take me in your ear. Yes, I should be in YouTube, I suppose, so that you don't have to like keep your Facebook open the whole time and not take a call in between. So the stomach ends up providing the place where it can be transformed into energy to the entire body. So you understand from this that the superficial use of energy in the food also gets cast to the outside. The finer energies go inward, and the lower stuff gets cast out. Ad hapsilas, until it becomes waste. Hagam shibamaychel she'ena bishul mayil laheitzia memenu shum chayas leguf. Adraba yidei habishul yikol nivdal gamri bepnimius v'yetzev v'nitchel l'chutz. So you can't just like swallow bricks of food and expect it to happen. You can't digest that. The digesting process is what allows it to divide up. So it's very analogous to the time of Birur that was until 31 years ago, when we had to rectify a lot of messed up stuff. Now it's supposed to be obvious when people say they're going to be a dictator, and they are a dictator. Wow, surprise, surprise. And we wonder why we elected them. And I'm not being political because I don't really care about that. Hashem controls the hearts of our politicians. It's not really the main. It's more important, I would think, to buy lottery tickets than to worry so much. You should vote, for sure, vote. And vote the way your shul political representative tells you, because they've probably done more research. But I would take seriously into consideration whether a person would want to start Chas v'Shalom a world war. That would be probably number one thing that I would vote for. I don't care if the guy is a nerd and a puppet. If the guy is crazy, I don't want him to be my leader. I'd rather him be a puppet of some normal people rather than an outright maniac to begin with. Your odds are better. It's a crapshoot. Okay. So you have this system that takes the outside out, the inward in. Is it two different zones entirely? Is the plumber to be looked down on for his occupation? Is the lower faculties of the human body to be looked down on? The magician's telling Ameimar. Vezeu ikar pulas hakravayim shnikra at stomako. And that's the intestine. Times it's called a stomach. Shnikra pulas gashmias. Because it does something physical by having to do with the lowly parts of the process also. That's this whole process of separating out the different energies from and giving like flow through the circulatory system till the choice energy goes up to the heart. And the more superficial stuff gets pushed out. Whereas the lungs and the heart, which is above the diaphragm, I guess, which is about here, it is not involved in the digestive process. So you put a diaphragm cleansing it of any sullying from there, any dirtying from there. So it looks like there's two zones. God made us a body so we can understand Hashem and understand the way the world works and how we can draw divine energy into it and connect to Hashem through that process. And he puts a diaphragm in the middle of the two zones. We wear a gartel, a belt, to separate the two zones. There is some concept, but how are you supposed to view it? The more integrated approach. That's why Yaakov is about integration, the final of the fathers, who is the father of only mitasei shleimo, whose bed is whole. All of his children became bastions of the same religion, as opposed to every of the other two fathers, Abraham and Isaac. We have Yishmael and Esav that came from them. That you don't say mitasa shleima, their bed was whole in this respect with regard to them. That is the dwelling place of the spirit of life, the lungs and the heart and the brain. Shehu ruch nilagami, which is entirely spiritual. Mashaleb palig l'chol shiafin hu mashanas adam l'chol hasmali l'bira ma'ikol kagavna. The fact that the heart, which is a higher faculty, sends out blood to the entire body is because that's expressed by the fact that it starts in the left ventricle. The system starts there, it ends in the right, I guess, comes back for rejuvenation, to be beat and pumped through the body again. But the system starts at the left side, which has some association also with the lower realm. So all of this discussion of what happens with our Wheaties, well, more accurately, our drink, will help us understand what's going on above. As David Melech says, King David says in Psalms, all my inside cries out in praise. Because there are angels that are called stomach, that refine divine energy in this way. As the Zayar says, there are three rulers in a person. They are above the mind and the heart, the kavda and the liver. The brain and the heart are the zone of the spirit of life, Helyanim, of higher life, Shebelev Adam Ha'elyain, which is in the heart of the supernal man. So God creates a world that's in the shape of a person because that helps us understand the way it works. Detzilis, Lechinas Chatzar Kaved, who Amavdil, and the diaphragm is the separator. Misham Vilamata Yesh Keach Hamavdil, Hashefel Yen Lechol Havarim. And from there down, there is the power to separate. So that's the digestive system. It separates the supernal energy to all of the facets of the world that start off in an angelic world and come down to the physical matrix we're in. Both with regard to the inner energy and the superficial energy, canal, as we said, that, as we said, the food and plate includes energy for everything that you're going to do. So the spiritual world works in a way that it gives different energies to different people, according to the level of their sort of purpose in the jigsaw. Ad hayeser chitzenis shebeshefa nimch shach lechitzenis ha'elmais, because this system goes even to the furthermost point in the matrix. There is divine energy. So divine energy goes into also the most superficial zone. Shehein mekablim hashmarim. That's the dregs of the universe. V'zer sherish kol tainuge oilam haza. So that explains the great command that physical delights have on us, because there is divine energy there. The way to view it, though, is what am I supposed to do with those lower frequencies? What does a good baseline sound like? How can it be that the pleasures of the world has that Nechshav rak mibchinas pseilas hashefa halyena. How could it be? This is fascinating. The Mitteler Rebbe is asking, how can it be that the physical pleasures of this world come from a divine source? Hine yesh lahaktim hayedua be'inyan gan eden haaretz ahu b'kav hashava v'kfar nalu chachmei olim u'maseilam. Because the Garden of Eden, what happened to it? Why can't you bounce across it one time when you're walking? Okay, there's Kruvim, there's these angels that block it, but that's not because you see it exactly. Have you ever seen the twirling swords, a flame that separate it? It's because it's on a different frequency that's not accessible now. It's based on the 4 elements. Earth, what is it? Earth, wind, isn't that like a funk band? But the elements have spiritual counterparts that don't actually exist. They're just ideas more than actual physical elements. So Gan Eden went up to there. The Garden of Eden now exists in an elemental spiritual zone that you can't find in the physical world because it's not aligned with the spiritual, like, building blocks of the universe. If it were to, you would see things the way they are. I'm wondering if I should actually start with a minute. Problem is, I'm right in the middle of an idea. Oh well. It looks dark out still. I shouldn't feel guilty from taking another moment to enjoy this incredible moment. Okay, so the Garden of Eden, where is it? You can't see it. Why? Because there are spiritual versions of the elements that it has sort of hidden away to. V'im kol zeh mekaven ha-Gan Eden al gav kav hashava. So the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, fits in line with the sort of divine flashlight. That's why you can't find it in the physical world. And from this we'll understand at least a little bit why it is that the Garden of Eden and its earth is so much different from physical pleasures. He also asks, why is it that it's a mitzvah to celebrate and not celebrate and have a good... It's a mitzvah to rejoice in Jerusalem and it's called an Eretz Zavas Chalav Dvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. If there's not something spiritual about that use of the earth that reflects the more Garden of Eden way of looking at things. So once you do that, you're aligned sort of with the supernal or the sort of spiritual Garden of Eden. And you could see how different the sort of self-gratifying approach to pleasure is from the pure spiritual pleasure in this way. Because we're basically going to say that the waste of the system, that's associated with the sort of self-gratifying approach to things. And that process has been rectified. Wow. Figure that out. That's what I've been trying to figure out every morning with you. Anyways, that's just like half of the Ameimar we did. There's more to go, and you'll have reason to return. Tonight's the Simcha, so we're going to have to take probably a little bit of a break. Hopefully we'll be back to our regular programming right after the Simcha with more Simcha than ever. Have a great day.